This is Meet the Author, and I'm your host, Tigner Rand. Meet the Author is a part of Rolling Out's Book Club series where I talk with authors about their new books, projects, and of course, what inspires them to write. Today, joining me is Wanda M. Morris. Miss Morris, on her full-time job, was at once a corporate attorney who has worked in the legal departments for several Fortune 100 companies. She is an accomplished presenter and leader and has previously served as the president of Georgia chapter of Association of Corporate Counsel and is the founder of its Women's Initiative and Empowerment Program for female in-house lawyers. But today we're going to talk to her about her new thriller novel, All Her Little Secrets, which follows the main character, Elise Littlejohn, who is simply has it all. She has an Ivy League law degree, a well-paying job as a corporate lawyer, and for fun, relationship with a rich, charming executive, her white boss, Michael. But everything changes one cold morning when Elise goes to meet Michael in his office. The Black female lawyer in an all-white law firm finds herself caught in a dangerous conspiracy after the sudden death of her boss. Without further ado, I would like to bring to our conversation today, Meet the Author, Miss Wanda M. Morris. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Tigner. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for taking time out. Before we get started, this is the book, All Her Little Secrets. This is a great page turner. It's a very interesting book. It's really an easy book, a fun book to read. And I am very glad that you were able to take time to talk with us. Also, the book is available on blackbookstore.com. So if you have not picked up a copy of your book yet, please go by and go to blackbookstore.com and you can pick up a copy today and pick up on everything we talk about today about this book. Before we get started, can you kind of add to the synopsis about what the book is all about? What will people find inside of Our Little Secrets? And if you could just also read a little passage or two of your favorite part of the book before we get into it.
Sure. So it is in the genre of a murder mystery. And I tell people, despite the body count in the book, it really is a story about love and loss and resilience and family. The theme of family runs throughout the book. The family we choose and the family that chooses us. So Elise Littlejohn, the main character of the book, is a very smart, beautiful, talented, but deeply flawed woman. And she has some dark secrets that she has spent the better part of her life kind of keeping them tamped down. And as you mentioned, she goes into the office one day for a meeting with her boss, and it's no spoiler, also her lover, and she finds him dead. And she does what many people would consider the unthinkable. She walks away without calling the authorities. So the story is told in dual timelines. So you get a sense of who she was as a 14-year-old girl, and then her as a working adult. And when you read her backstory, you come to understand why she's made some of the decisions, good, bad, and otherwise, that she makes throughout the book. It is a book that's kind of like my love letter to working women, particularly Black women, and what we experience in corporate America, and just kind of trying to live our lives in this country as Black and Brown people. So the section that I'll read to you occurs fairly late in the book. And it is Elise, as she is reflecting on kind of everything she's gone through, having worked in corporate America, and kind of living this life of success. I stopped the car in front of a single-story shotgun house near the end of Periwinkle Lane. The windows now boarded up with wood planks and painted over with fading hues of red and black graffiti. Looking at this house was like looking into the cracked mirror of my psyche. There weren't enough $2,000 dresses or Bernhardt linen office chairs in the world to erase where I came from. But driving through this town, I caught a glimpse of what I'd forgotten since entering the executive suite. I realized who I was. I was a fighter. Black girls, big boned and thick skinned, fight all the time. We fight to be heard, to be recognized, to stay alive. We fight even when we don't know we're fighting. And now, despite all the labels society tried to place on me, I knew I wasn't an angry Black woman. I was a fighting Black woman, and I trained hard right here in this town.
Interesting that you start at that point. And that was kind of the pivotal moment of the book without us getting too deep. That was kind of a point where Elise really kind of started seeing herself other than trying to conceal herself the entire time throughout the book. And you bring up a good point because the workplace, especially for women, Black women, it could be a daunting task. So was that kind of intentional to kind of give a snippet of what it looks like for women of color and Black women in particular working in corporate America throughout the book? Because that was kind of a message throughout the entire book.
Yeah, I was intentional about that, Tigner. I set out to write a book about being a Black female in this country. And whether you are working in the echelons of, executive suites in corporate America, or you're just trying to go out and shop in a boutique with your girlfriend Sunday after brunch, it's tough. And someone once asked me, well, did you set out to cover all these topics? Because there are some very heady topics in the book.
Yes.
Did you set out to cover, racism and gender and all these other things? And I said, I didn't set out to write this legal thriller that would, check these boxes. I set out to write this woman's story. Now, of course, it's fictional and it goes to some very dark places. But I think that there is something in the story that resonates with a lot of women.
Yes.
I found that it's resonated with women across races, across age groups. I hear from women who are 20-something who say, oh my gosh, that happened in my office, or, those microaggressions and that gaslighting and, the outward, discriminatory behavior, I think cuts across a lot of lines.
Yes, it does. And I think that you covered it quite well because
thank you.
I've worked in corporate America and you see those little subtle hints, and sometimes they don't really know what they're doing, and sometimes they do because it's just so second nature, but it happens. How, in this case, Elise was in pretty much all white law firm, and part of one of the topics of discussion happened to be about discrimination, which impacted the law firm. Was it all that kind of intentional to kind of show the different elements of how corporate America, and in this case, in a law firm can be, even though they were trying to cover up, but they were still trying to say we are diverse. Where's your diversity? You only have one sister in the entire firm.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because I don't think that this story, albeit fictional, veers too far off from reality, that there are very few and far of us in these very higher ranks of corporate America. I was reading an article, I think it was in either Forbes or Fortune magazine earlier this year, that said recent statistics show that there are only 3% of Blacks in the executive suite in Fortune 500 companies. That is a very small amount of
Yes,
people.
it is.
And yeah, it really is. And so, while some people might say, well, gosh, Atlanta is kind of this mecca for, Black success. And true, we have a large Black population here. There are lots of successful Black and brown people here. But the fact remains that we are still very, very short in representation in very high and executive level positions.
Yes.
And so we have a lot of companies across this country that speak to diversity, but not necessarily acting it out within their, executive suites, within the ranks of the organization that actually make a difference. And that's unfortunate because that means a lot of us,
Yes.
not just the people who are, shunned from those ranks, but the company's initiatives, how they respond to their customers, how they interact with their suppliers. When everybody looks homogeneous in the upper ranks, you get homogeneous thinking.
Yes.
It's unfortunate for everybody all around.
That is so true. And we've seen it pre-COVID. There were a lot of major brands who had commercials that come out. You could tell the insensitivity of the commercials because there was no color in the room to say, hey, that was not a smart move to do that particular commercial. Mm-hmm. We saw with major apparel companies doing the same thing, that, you can tell. It's really sad that, that and they think that they're doing everything and, apropos to their brand and, this is great, but you're being hyper unsensitive to other people.
Right. Yeah, it's more than just checking off a box and saying, okay, yeah, we have a commercial that has, Black people. My husband and I often joke about some of those companies. You probably heard it. You're listening to the radio. There's an ad that comes on. And if it is a radio station that's geared primarily to whites, the voices are different. But if it's a radio station that's on the higher end of the FM spectrum, 107.5, everybody's got to talk like this, and you're like, I understand English, so you don't have to do those kinds of things. And I think that's where the insensitivity comes in. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I totally agree. We could take it further. I mean, to the point, why does every time it's, you got Black in it, it has to be someone dancing or moving? It's like, okay, we can sit down and have an intellectual conversation at the dinner table, but you got to always have someone dancing or moving or jiving.
Or choir robes.
Choir robes. Like, yes, it's so the insensitivity of it. And Elise was one, she actually dealt with that throughout the book, be it from her childhood all the way up to her adulthood and in the corporate sector, and to the point that she was given this C-suite opportunity, which I know it's for the book, but it was interesting on how she got it. It's like, okay, she even tried to, why don't we get this vetted? Like, no, you got the job.
Right. So, here's a job that she's always craved, but she doesn't even have a say in her own career.
Right.
And so often people are very quick to say, let me do the right thing by you. It's like, I'm a grown woman. I can make my own decisions. And so, again, it was, I wanted to play with those assumptions that people make that, oh, you're always craving this and you so want to be a part of this. And here we'll throw a bunch of money at you. And of course you'll take it because we know what's best for you. Yeah.
One thing I like that you did with Elise, and I know I don't want to generalize it or even make light of it, but you find so many people Black men and women, when they get to that level, they tend to try to lose their Blackness.
Mm-hmm.
Elise did not lose her Blackness.
Nope.
That more than anything in the book, even though she was trying to conceal some of the dark secrets of her past,
Mm-hmm.
but she never lost who she was.
Right, right. And again, it's more of the same. It's more of, us trying to be seen and heard in these predominantly white spaces. And that's tough because at one point in the book, she deals with, somebody kind of makes an offhand remark, oh, your hair looks pretty that way. Meaning that she had it, silk pressed instead of in coils. And so it's pretty that way. So wherever, she is trying to be who she is, then that's not necessarily accepted as,
exactly
part of what is seen as right here. It's interesting because, you're constantly telling yourself when you are in spaces like this that, I am smart and I deserve to be here. I remember personally sitting in, boardrooms and conference rooms where I was the only one.
Right.
And, I make a comment or a suggestion and it's roundly dismissed. White man makes the same comment and everybody, lifts him up on their shoulders like, what a great suggestion.
Great idea. Like,
yeah.
Did I not just say that?
Exactly. Like, are we not in the same room having the same conversation? And so I was constantly having to tell myself in the back of my mind, you know what? I paid for my law degree just like everybody else around this table. I deserve to be here. So I'm going to keep talking because my voice ought to be heard too. But again, there's a certain weariness that comes with that too.
Yes.
And having to constantly do that gets exhausting. It does.
Exactly. And then at that point, as you just kind of alluded to, if you continue trying to get your point across, oh, Wanda is the angry Black woman.
Exactly. Yes.
No, I'm not. You're ignoring me as if I'm speaking a foreign language. And we all have a law degree. We all can speak law language, but for some reason, you don't understand what I'm saying.
Right. Right.
So now you become the angry Black woman because you have to raise your voice a half an octave. But it's okay for Jack to raise and scream and rat and rave and curse everyone out.
Exactly. If I tried to do that, oh my gosh, the walls would come tumbling.
You need anger management training. Wanda, is everything okay today? You have a bad day at home? What? No, I have nothing to do with home. It's you, but you can't say that to.
It's being in these spaces. Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. How does this book depict you in any way? Are there any elements of Wanda in here?
I once read a long time ago where, every book has a little bit of the author in it. And so I won't lie that there are some pieces of me in here, and some of the experiences certainly come out of my own lived experiences. Some of the things that have happened in corporate America, the whole racial profiling bit. I've been racially profiled more times than I can count. But in terms of Elise as a character, as a person, I'm certainly very committed and devoted to family the way she was. She had, her one brother and her Aunt V. And so certainly I think that part of me is throughout the book that, I fight for family. Yeah.
Awesome. That family means everything. And yes, you do talk about family, which I do like, between especially Elise growing up and the closeness of her brother, Aunt V, who is that backbone of the community, who seems to, the wherewithal to help her find that ticket out of this mess. But then there's also all of a sudden the corporate say we're family here too. So
Oh, yeah.
inside the
Yeah.
corporate sector. So there's a two different, you talk about two different type families and in a different way. Um, what was there any underlying message you was trying to convey about family?
Yeah, interestingly enough, this idea for the book came out of an experience I had where I worked for an organization once and executive management called everybody family. You know, employees were family, customers were family. You were all part of the blip blip family. And I worked in the legal department and someone in my department died. Now, there was nothing sinister about it. The person just died. And I was just mortified by how quickly everyone went back to normal after this, so-called family member died. I mean, the office was cleaned out. The next day, the name was taken off the door, and then nobody ever talked about this person again. And I was like, wait, like, shouldn't we be extending ourselves to the family, to his biological family? Shouldn't we be talking about this? Like it was as if this person never existed.
Right.
And I was just mortified. And I think that stayed with me because, the organization talked about all this family stuff, but you still had women and people of color and disabled who were not treated very well in terms of, pay equity, promotional opportunities.
Yes.
And so I wanted to play with this whole idea of, who is family and why do we call them family? Because again, no spoiler, Elisa's Aunt V was not biologically related to her, but she was closer to her than, any other person.
Mother.
Right, or mother, right. And so here again is a family bond that demonstrates that, family comes in all different shapes and sizes. And just because somebody calls you family means absolutely nothing. It's what they do that demonstrates the familial bond.
Yes, exactly. Now, you did kind of talk about the premise of that part of the death in the organization. Was that also part of how you came up with additional, deliberately creating the title of the book, creating My Little Secrets, or what's the backstory to the title?
It's interesting. The book was originally called The Elephant Fighter, and it is based on an African proverb that says, when elephants fight, the only thing that suffers is the grass. And that still serves as the epigraph at the beginning of the book. Mm-hmm. And the book is divided into 3 sections: the elephants, the grass, and the fight. And I've always loved that, because the proverb essentially means that when you have people who are in power, the people with the resources who bicker, the ones who suffer the most are the people who are without, the little people. Wow. And so, of course, when I got the book contract, my editor was like, oh, we love this book, but we need a different title, because they wanted something that really spoke to kind of the mystery thriller aspect of the story. And so we bounced around a lot of titles and finally landed on this, which I think is pretty apropos given all that Elise tries to tamp down.
Yeah, and I think that it really speaks volume to the book, because as you read it, I like the way that you broke it down by segment, and then as you kind of did the flashback to get a snippet of a little nugget every time, mm-hmm. to tell you a little bit about the secret with why she was so secretive within mm-hmm. the office. Well, no pictures, or I don't have any family, I'm the only child. I mean, she really would, she took it to the 10th power.
Yeah, and that was intentional too, because as you mentioned, the story is told in dual timelines. So you've got, these chapters, these intervening chapters that show what happened to her as she was a young child. And she suffered some pretty traumatic events as a young girl. And I think that trauma affects people differently. And
Yes.
that whereas, people who are pretty healthy and stable might think, that's not something that I would typically do. Having gone through the sorts of trauma she did, it was lasting. And I wanted to demonstrate to people that you can't judge. You can't judge by what someone looks like or even where someone comes from. I mean, she decided she was going to put on this mask of expensive clothes and surround herself with these accoutrements of success in order to kind of tamp down all that pain and that trauma. And it didn't really work, obviously, as you can tell by the time you get to the end of the book. But it was also my way of hearkening to the fact that we as, Black and brown people suffer a lot of trauma.
Yes.
And, I always commend people who are brave enough to go and get the resources, the therapy, whatever help you need, because who amongst us who is Black and brown that doesn't need to talk to somebody after all that we go through?
Right.
And she did not do that, obviously. She decided she was taking a different path. And so, my hope is that people realize that, she had a lot of trauma that she suffered, and this was her way of coping with that, to keep these secrets, to keep things close to the vest.
Yeah. And you're so right, because it's a form of mental disorder where we find things to appease. You go shopping therapy, or some will go and use sex as a way of being able to cope with, or we become, drinking or social drugs. But at the end of the day, the book had you wrote it in a way that helped to kind of see those things, but it would have been better to be able to go sit down with a therapist to figure out why.
Right.
But
exactly.
Sometimes pride and ego gets in our way, or we think we can handle it on our own. And she tried it in her own way, but for the sake of the book, it worked out fine. But it still, look what all she had to go through. It was a constant battle to keep this hidden all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is the grip that secrets and that trauma has on us, that it is a battle. It's a real, you're in a fight to keep all that down, keep all the lies straight, because, she was telling people one thing and telling other people something else. And so that is a heavy, heavy burden to carry.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that people kind of read this and say, you go talk to somebody, get yourself a therapist.
Exactly. It's nothing wrong with it. I know growing up, we're at age where people were like, they would say, don't go to a psychiatrist because they think you're crazy.
Yeah.
But counseling is nothing wrong with going to a form of counseling to be able to sit down and talk. And I hope that people, when they read the book, will read between the lines, because, and see elements of themselves, because I could see elements of myself through the book.
Yeah.
Not at the grandiose level of Elise, but there are still those things. We all try to find things that we want to put to the side and suppress of our past.
Exactly. And that's why I always say it's nothing wrong. There's no shame in getting that, because some problems, some trauma, it's too large to, pray away and drink away and all those other things that you think numbs the pain.
You have to talk. You have to have someone to talk to.
Exactly. You need to have a professional intervene.
We didn't talk about the brother, but see, that was kind of his way. He figured, well, I'm going to figure a way out of this, and everything led him down a rabbit hole that was always not the best rabbit hole to go down, because he didn't talk to anyone either. So you show two parallels of this.
Exactly.
One who made it to the C-suite by concealing, one who spent time locked up, but yet they both were trying to find a way out of this, but never even talking amongst themselves.
Exactly. Yeah, there are a couple scenes in the book where you can tell they never really discussed the trauma that they both shared, even amongst themselves. And I wanted people to understand that, even when you come out of this shared experience, that, the path, the trajectory for your life can be so different depending on
Yes.
how you choose to deal with what you deal with. I also wanted to play with too this fact that Elise was kind of the beneficiary of the success because she took a different path. She winds up in an organization where people have very little information about her, but they make all these assumptions about her. And then she turns around and she meets a man who she has very little information about, but she makes all these assumptions about her. And I'm talking about Juice. And he calls her.
Yeah.
And he's like, there you go again.
Atypical person. Like you what's the old saying? Never judge a book by its cover.
Exactly.
Well, she prejudged Juice all because of his name.
Exactly. And how often do we do that? Right?
Almost all the time.
Exactly. That's not a black-white thing. I think that's a people thing.
That's a universal. Your people. And you did a great job with that, because I almost fell into the trap. Like, okay, Juice is hanging out with a brother. Juice is, his name is Juice. You did a great job.
Thank you. I know it's kind of like, I don't want to spoil that for the reader. I know, right? Yeah, you have to read the book. Go read the book, folks.
Yeah, I was right along with Elise. Like, now I'm not giving you my phone number. No, you don't need a phone number. Like, that was a good one. Yeah, and I really forgot about Juice until you brought it up. Like, yeah, what do you want the readers to take away? Are there anything you want them to read or expect that they can expect out of this book? Anything?
There are a couple things. First and foremost, I hope that people, black, white, blue, or otherwise, read the book and it sparks dialogue and conversation around these topics, because there's much work still to be done. I mean,
yes,
we are not riding in the back of buses or going in through the back of restaurants, but we still have much work to do around a lot of these issues, and not just race, but gender and some of the other topics that are covered in Elise's backstory. And so I hope that it sparks conversation on, if you're white and you've never had this experience, evaluate, am I being an ally or am I exacerbating the problem? If you're black or brown, what can you do to raise consciousness around these issues as well? And then I think the other thing I really like people to understand, because it's a book after all, and so I wrote it in addition to having, covered these topics, I hope it's entertaining. And I hope that in finding it entertaining, that you will also recognize, hey, Black women can show up in thriller books and be exciting and engaging, because I've got like shelves back here of John Grisham and other, thriller authors. But I wrote this book because I couldn't find a thriller with a lead character that looked like me.
Black, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I hope that people will come to the table with the expectation that I'd like to see more Black women writing books like this, being lead characters in books like this.
Exactly. And good point, because there are a lot of attorneys, lawyers who turn authors, and probably the best one you mentioned was John Grisham, and he's written a myriad of books on myriad of topics. But as you state, none were lead characters were Black.
Right, exactly. And I think too, we bring something different to
a different
characters.
Voice, a different sound.
Exactly. Different experiences.
Yeah. Good.
And
I've
so
read just about all of John's books. I like John, but then, like you
I do
say,
too. I love John Grisham.
when you read it, it reads like any Southern white book by a
Mhm.
Southern writer. He covers a lot of Mississippi, you
Yep.
know. But what would the voice be if you would have wrote that? We'll say with a Mississippi voice from a Black lawyer. It would have a different cadence to it, a different sound that
Mhm.
that most people couldn't. Blacks could relate to it because we can see and feel ourselves in it. No
Right.
different in your book. I mean, it's about a sister, but I can relate to almost every element. Going to the country club, I've been there, done that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we didn't even talk about that. That's a whole
Hey,
nother
talk about
thing.
that.
Exactly.
I've been around the good old boys who even the suit and the tie. Won't you come over and drink with us today? Like, or let's go camping. Oh, I don't think I want to go camping.
I don't know about that. Yeah.
Right. I've been there. So you touched on all those situations, even being the only one in the room,
Mhm.
and the assumption that, oh, you got this job because.
Exactly.
No, I got
Yep.
this job because someone saw that I was credible and reliable and had the credentials to get me here.
Exactly. So yeah, you're right. I am
You
hoping that
touched on it. You touched on it, which you could really take this and take it and almost could have drilled down on each one of those and turn that into a 800-page novel. Easy.
exactly. Easily, these topics easily could have been covered in one book. And so that's why sometimes I had to give, just a little attention to it. I
Yeah,
was limited by
yeah,
pages.
right. He said, let me just give you a little snippet,
Yeah.
and hopefully you can pick up on it and see that, hey, this is what really goes on. Because though this is a fiction book, it was not off, but you was not off target
Oh,
at
thank you.
all of what happens in the boardroom. From it doesn't even have to be at the executive C-suite level. It could be just at the regular second and third level management level. As an employee, you sit there and scratch your head about the things that's happening in the room.
Exactly. Yep. No, you're right. It doesn't even have to be at the executive level.
It just a matter of what part of the country you're in.
Mhm.
Atlanta is different from going to Iowa.
Yeah.
Or
But
as we
yeah, the themes are still the same. I think you can find some of Elisa's story in New York City, or
yeah,
like it's Iowa, or LA, or
yep.
Atlanta. I picked Atlanta because I wanted to deal with some of the dichotomies of the city. But yeah, I think some of her story you can find anywhere in this country.
Anywhere.
Anywhere.
What inspires you to write?
Wow. I think I just always had this affinity for words and books, and I've always loved it. And, I meet so many people, and I think they always kind of bubble in the back of my mind. And I love creating characters and worlds and seeing what makes people tick and how could I put that down on a page. I think it's just always been something I've been fascinated with.
You brought up something that is for characters. How do you draw up your characters? How do you write your characters? Or where do you get your creativity for your characters?
It's interesting for this book. A lot of the characters kind of came out of real people that I knew. I never named names, but even someone like Aunt Vera, the character Vera, who is like the mother figure to Elise in this book. She's like an amalgam of my mom and my grandmom and aunts, those women who were, forces to be reckoned with in the community. They cared for
Yeah.
everybody. I remember growing up, we always had someone living in our house, that was not a brother or sister. It was like, cousin so-and-so is staying with us for a little while until he gets back on his feet. There was always someone my mom was reaching out to and helping. And some of the characters in the corporate suite, yeah, they were kind of amalgams of people that I've known and worked with, unfortunately or fortunately. But I think the character comes to me as I'm preparing to write something. The character has to come to me first. And then I kind of build the plot around them. And so Elise came to me first. She was a character that kind of bubbled up in my head eons ago, because I started this book like 13 years ago. And
Wow.
yeah, and I wrote like 70% of it. And then I put the book away because I convinced myself, yeah, who's going to want to read a book about a middle-aged Black woman dealing with all these god-awful people? And so I didn't think my writing was very good. So I put it away. And then I picked it up about 6 years ago.
What made you pick it back up after you convinced yourself?
Right, exactly. And left it sitting dormant for 7 years. But I'd had some health issues. And I got through the health issues, but then I started evaluating, like, what brings me joy? I'm working in this really stressful job. I'm doing all these things for everybody else. What am I doing for me? And writing has always been that. And so I said, let me pull it back out. And I didn't have an ending, the first draft. And I pulled it back out and it was really, really bad. It was awful. But I was always in love with these characters, Elise and Sam and Vera. And I said, well, let me just get to the end. Let me write an ending and see how it goes. And once I got back into it, I couldn't put it down. And but then it was like, another 5 years of rejection, because I went out trying to get an agent and got tons and tons and tons of rejection. And then in 2019, I was at a conference, and as part of the conference, you could pitch to different agents. And I sat in front of a lovely woman and I told her this story, and she was like, "Whew, that sounds really good. Send it to me." And I sent it to her, and 24 hours later, she sent me back an
Oh,
email.
wow.
I am loving The Elephant Fighter. And last year, and that's the other thing too. I got a contract last year. I don't have any misgivings. I think this book came about in its time, because we went out on submission last year after, George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. And I think people were more attentive to issues like this. And, I'm grateful.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we went out on submission. I think George Floyd was killed in June of 2020.
No, in May. It was right after Labor Day. I mean,
it's May.
Labor
It's
Day.
Right. Memorial Day.
Thank you. Labor Day in May.
Right.
Okay.
And so we went out in July of 2020, and 12 days later, we were in an auction for the book.
Wow, that was awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a firm believer. All things happen in this right season.
Exactly.
We as tendency in our carnal minds try to force things because we believe it's time for it to happen. But you just stated how you wrote it 13 years ago. It sat dormant for 7, but then look what happened in 2020. So it just in our mind's eye, if you look back, 20 years, nothing like that. It sounds okay, but that's too far-fetched.
Exactly. And some of the earlier rejection I got, like back in 2016, 2017, it was kind of like, no, I don't really think so. The premise. So yeah, it was not time for this book. It was not time for this book. I agree with you. I think everything comes in its own time.
What do you tell that young author, that young brother or sister who wants to write? What advice could you give them?
I tell them, don't do what I do. Keep writing, because I stopped for 7 years. Don't do that. Don't be me. But yeah, whatever you do, keep writing. And because you never know how close you are. I was ready to give up on this book a second time because I had gotten so much rejection. And so, all it takes is one yes. So if you're writing, keep writing. I also advise people read a lot too, because then you get to know, what is a good book, what is a not so good book. because it makes a difference. It makes a difference whether you're, whatever genre you're writing in. I think being a good reader makes you a good writer as well.
Oh, I like that. And I agree. I have to agree with that. Ideas can be spawned from just looking and reading someone else.
Right.
Exactly. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
How important is it for Black writers such as yourself to get their stories told?
Yeah, very much so. Right. I tell people all the time, you may look at your writing and think, what of this? But there are people out there that are craving to read what you create. So, keep at it. Like I said, years ago, I told myself, nobody is going to want to read about, this middle-aged woman who goes through all this horrendous stuff. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe
it's not a maybe. It's not a maybe, because the reviews of the book have been remarkable. People have, you've gotten rave reviews from some of the big names in the literary industry. Yeah. So for this to be your first novel and to be at that level where the who's who of literary is raving over the book and they like it, I mean, that speaks volumes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you being modest, I get it. I mean, I can say
it. Well, thank you, Tigna. I appreciate you saying it.
I can say it, but I can see you doing more of these.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
I know it comes down to time. I mean, do you have a certain cadence or style of writing? Now that this one is in the can.
Yeah, right.
So how do you see yourself now evolving? Do you see yourself doing more?
Oh, definitely. I just finished up my second book. So I am putting the final polish on that. That one, I have to turn it into my publisher in January. So my writing process is, I mean, I had the luxury of time when I was writing that one. This one, they're like, can you give us another book in a year? So it's like, yeah, okay.
So you didn't have all the time in the world this time.
I do not. But, I am pretty much one of these people. I don't put that kind of pressure, like I have to do 1,000 words a day. But what I do is I make sure I am at the desk every day and I am doing something towards my writing career, whether that means I'm outlining for the next book or I'm actually writing words on a current work in progress, or I'm gazing out the window trying to figure out characters to put in a book. But I need to be at the desk every day and putting in some solid hours towards the next project.
That's awesome. What is there a certain time of the day that's better for you to be creative? Early morning, late at night?
Mornings. My brain is fried by 4:30, 5 o'clock. Nah, I'm not much good. So yeah, I usually get to the desk early in the morning. I kind of do my prayer, meditation, and then I launch into work. Yeah.
I use the analogy to our brain is like a computer. It's like overload. Whatever it is you're doing all day, I'm fresh too in the morning. So I really try to wake up first thing in the morning. The house is quiet, meditate, pray, do everything. And whatever I'm doing, it's just complete silence, No noise, no white noise, no ambient noise. It's just, you can.
That's funny. That's the way I am too. I cannot write to music. I mean, first of all, I'm like real old school Tigner. So like I write all my first drafts in longhand.
Oh my God. See, I can't even read my longhand. So
I am like writing with a yellow notepad and, blue G2 Pilot gel pens. And it has to be quiet. I can't write in coffee houses. I can't write to music, jazz, none of that. If I'm typing in the manuscript, my longhand, I could usually listen to some, light jazz.
Yeah, that's different. Yeah, yeah.
Right? But if I am trying to create, it has to be completely quiet. Yeah.
Besides the computer, do you use any other type technology for your for writing?
I do. I use my phone a lot, which is interesting. I find I take notes because, I'll go out for a walk or I'm out shopping and a character will say something in the back of my head. And I'm like, ooh, that's a good line for Vera to say. And so I usually have a whole folder of notes in my phone as well. But I've never really gotten the hang of Scrivener and those kinds of software programs. It's all longhand for me. It's something about it, like traveling from my brain down through my right arm and into my hand or something.
But that comes with the craft. I mean, as an attorney, you had to take a lot of copious notes and writing, and so it almost becomes second nature. Just I can see that.
I never thought of it, but I think you're absolutely right because I was always in meetings, taking notes and you're right.
Because you did not have the access of a computer to take the notes, or if you were in front of a client talking, you had to really be attentive. You may have had a dictation, recorder to for dictation, but that's about it.
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. Until you said that, I hadn't put the two together, but I think you're absolutely.
Yeah, shoot, that's like riding a bicycle for you. It's like so, through college, through law school, and in the boardroom or with a client, you had to take notes. Like me, I would have a hard time. I can't even read my own handwriting. I'm worse than a doctor. I have journals at home and I'm sitting there reading them, and then all of a sudden, like, what were you trying to say? I can't even read it. It's like,
I am sure it's not that bad.
Trust me, I promise you, there are some times I've read it because I've been trying to transcribe it now. So okay, let me transcribe it from the book to the, at least put it in digital form. And I honestly don't know what I wrote. That's how bad it is. The first page is almost, it's legible. But that third page, it's a line.
That's funny.
I got F's in school when it came to penmanship. Yeah, I went to Catholic school. So I had a lot of F's in the elementary school because my penmanship was not the greatest. And I'm like, well, I had the smart mouth too. Like, well, you can't read a doctor's handwriting, so why I got to read mine?
You're not a doctor.
That's exactly what the nun would say. Like, that's why you in school. Like, okay, whatever.
That's funny. That's funny.
What was the hardest part about writing this book?
I think the hardest part is a very pivotal scene that occurs in the middle of the book. I'm going to keep it spoiler free. And I was going, because it's a story about siblings, and I was struggling with a sibling, and I wound up writing a particular scene, and then I had to put it away. It got to be too much. It got to be too much because it hit too close to home, and that's all I'll say on that.
Wow.
Yeah,
I understand. What did you like best about writing this book?
I loved writing Elise when she was in that kind of smart ass mode, or Grace, because I wanted to bring some sense of, for lack of a better term, joy. And so writing some of those scenes where, Grace was supporting her, or Grace was admonishing her, because Grace kind of had her own journey she was on too,
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
She was trying to figure that out. And And I think so, writing about those female relationships, even, Elise's relationship with Willow, who was, she was a white female, but she was also having to navigate this toxic, work environment. And so I think those were some of the scenes that I enjoyed the most. And then, of course, writing passages that were akin to that one that I read at the top, where I got to express some of that, that frustration of, having worked in environments like this, and what it does to your psyche.
Right. That's good. Before we get out, a couple of fun questions.
Mhm.
Tell me, we're coming up on the holidays. Are there any traditional holiday things that you and the family do?
Oh my gosh, yes. So Christmas happens to be my very favorite holiday of the year.
Okay.
And I take it, I'm like Christmas on steroids.
Oh
So
my goodness.
I have three kids, and when my kids were very, very young, I would dress them in pajamas that looked alike. And then, I looked at the Christmas pictures one year and I was like, my husband ought to be dressed up, and I ought to be dressed up too. And so now everybody does Christmas pajamas.
No. No.
Yes. And yes, and my husband initially balked too. And he was like,
Oh my God.
I'm like, yes, it'll be so much fun and the kids will enjoy it. And it's interesting, Tina, because now I am kind of like, I want to pull back, because I'm like, why don't we like go to Hawaii for Christmas? And now my kids are like, and not have at home with Christmas pajamas and pictures.
Oh wow. So everybody has bought into this.
Everybody has bought into it. And so now I can't let it go.
So the ringleader is ready to go to Hawaii, and everybody else want to come.
So Christmas Eve is a big deal in our house. We all get in our Christmas pajamas, and we have music blasting, and we're dancing, and we're cooking, and it's a pretty big deal in
That's
our
awesome.
house.
Any
Yeah.
favorite holiday meals, foods that you like to prepare?
I am partial to like Cornish hens and
Mm.
turkeys on Christmas. Yeah.
Who does all the cooking? You, or do the kids help out? Or
No, actually, my sister lives with us.
okay.
My older sister lives with us, and she's a very good cook, and she likes to cook, so she cooks. Now, I will set a mean dinner table. Okay, can nobody mess me when it comes to setting the table.
So you can lay it out, huh?
I can lay it out. I'll decorate the place. I mean, we literally have 2 Christmas trees up in our house, and it ain't like we got a big house. Okay, it's just that I love Christmas. So yeah, I do all the decorating. I'll set the table, but she does the cooking, and I'm blessed.
Yes, that is a blessing. Any favorite desserts you like? What's your favorite?
Gosh, she makes this lemon icebox pie that,
Ooh,
yeah, I once I was pregnant and I ate an entire pie by myself, and that just is not good, but it's so good. And she makes a pound cake that's to die for. My husband's sweet potato pie, I think, rivals her pound cake.
oh wow.
My husband is
Yes,
a good baker.
that's
Yeah.
sinful. I can eat an entire pound of potato pie by myself in one day. And that's not, I don't say that with pride, but it's addiction. If it's a good pie.
If it's a good pie.
Yeah, I'm just eat one piece. I'll cut a potato pie two halves.
Just say
Then I
take a half.
I eat this. Okay, I'm just gonna eat this one piece. So that's two slices that make one whole. So okay, I'm just gonna eat this one piece. I'm done. 30 minutes later, okay, I'm gonna cut this in half. I'm gonna eat this little. Before the end of the night, my daughter will come in like, I thought there was a potato pie in here. Oh, I didn't think you wanted any. So now I have to ask, do you want some potato pie? Yes. Okay, I'll save it. I'm going to put it away. I'll put it in the refrigerator. Hide it. I'll wait 3 days. After the third day, if that pie is still there, I will eat it.
Yeah, my husband bakes a mean sweet potato pie.
Oh gosh, yeah, I would love to taste it. I would eat that potato pie. There'll be one for the family and then one for me.
Right.
We have been talking with author Wanda M. Morris about her new book, great book, All Her Little Secrets, which is now available on blackbookstore.com. This is a great book to pick up for yourself, and you got the holidays coming up. It's also a great book to pick up for the holidays. It's not too late for that. I want to thank you for joining me today for a great conversation about your book, about writing, about being creative. And before we leave, please let everyone know how they can get in contact with you, your social media handles, and any other special way to be able to follow Ms. Wanda Morris.
Absolutely. So I am at WandaMorrisWrites.com. That's my website. I'm on Facebook as Wanda Morris Writer. I am on Instagram as Wanda Mo Writes. And I'm on Twitter as Wanda Mo 14. So you can find me. I'm all over the place because, I'm falling into the addiction with social media. I literally have to turn my phone off when I'm writing because I could fall into a rabbit hole. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I'm on all those platforms.
That's true. You have to. So once you sit down and start writing, you got to make sure you get into that channel, because otherwise you'll find yourself going down a rabbit hole that you don't need to go down, and like, I spent 30 minutes doing this.
Right.
The 30 minutes could have been a valuable writing time, and I'm over here.
Exactly.
I thank you once again for joining us today. Continue being creative, continue writing, and use your words to express all the feelings that you have. And we will look forward to seeing more great work from you in the near future.
Thank you so much, Tigner. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, and make it a great day. Make it an awesome week.
Bye, everyone.